Welcome to the DIY Goalie Podcast, where hosts and goalie coaches Nathan Park and Connor Monday share their insights on how to become a better goalie.
Goalies, how's it going? My name is Connor Monday, and welcome back to the DIY Goalie Podcast, presented by True North Goaltending. Once again, back in the driver's seat again. Nathan Park on assignment once again. I'm very, very excited to be joined today by PWHL Frost's Marlene Boissonnault. Marlene, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Just running on a little bit of less than optimal sleep this morning, so not exactly the start that I want to have this morning, but it's going to be a busy day for me nonetheless. But we appreciate you coming on here. Where this is definitely one of the more exciting interviews that we're going to be doing today.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me. This is exciting. Excited to chat.
Well, goalies talking goalies. We can always appreciate that. I guess first off, we'll just do a little bit of an introduction and a bit of a background on you here. Obviously, you are the reserve goaltender right now for PWHL Frost, but you're also playing for PWHL Montreal Victoire, as well as in the PWHPA, KRS Vanke Rays, and Cornell Big Reds. So just give us a little bit of a background on just kind of how you got into goaltending, your playing career up to this point, and we'll go at it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who's from a small town that had big dreams, basically. I guess is how you could set it up. But ultimately, born and raised in northern New Brunswick, speaking only French, played all the minor hockey out of my hometown in a small little Dalhousie Minor Hockey Association. Was one of two girls playing for the most part. And then once I got to about grade 9, grade 10 is when things really picked up for me. I had been playing for Team New Brunswick for quite a couple of years by that time, but that's when I got called up by Team Canada, where I started to play with them at the U18 level, which got me more eyes onto me. And so there was a prep school in southern New Brunswick that called me up to go to their prep school. I think it was supposed to be for my grade 9 year. But like I said, I only grew up speaking French, so I was never able to basically have full conversations in English, let alone go to an English school. So in grade 10, I decided to make that final jump. My parents let me kind of leave the nest and go and dive right into an English program where I had to not only learn English, but also try to have good grades and everything for university, because back then, obviously, it was an opportunity for me to learn English to then be able to go play NCAA. So I played prep school for my last 3 years of high school. Throughout that, played for the national team, and then got recruited by a handful of universities. And luckily enough, I was able to pick out of that to go to Cornell, because to me, Cornell just was very much so the cherry on top of everything. It had everything I could ever dream of. And then from there, the year I graduated, and actually the month I graduated from university, the CWHL folded, which was the only kind of standing professional men's hockey league, if you want to call it that. That was, happening back then. Once that folded, obviously at that point you're kind of scrambling around to find a place to play. That's when the PWHPA got created the following year. And so I was able to join that since I was lined up to obviously play in the CWHL. And then I played on that team, or on that in that program, for 3, maybe 4 years, and then eventually made it onto PWHL Montreal when the inaugural season finally launched. And then from there, this year, I got picked up by Minnesota, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Lot to unpack there. So I guess we'll start with this. So how did you get into playing goal? What obviously, like, we hear, like, like the stands, like usually, like, for everybody it's the pads. I don't know if you can tell right there, but that's my last ever set of pads that I had, the old Reebok P4s right there. So just what got you into playing goal?
To be honest, my story is a little bit not as exciting. It was more so kind of a jealousy game. I had one older brother. I come from a massive family. We're a family of 6 kids. 6 kids born in 6 years, no twins, and I'm the fourth. And one of my older brother was a goalie, and my dad was a goalie. And to be honest with you, they just seem to get this different treatment where goalies just they when you were a kid, they almost got to run the show in a certain way, because you're a kid and it's sometimes easier for a goalie as a kid to play the game just because you're big, the kids can't really lift the puck. So you were really a game changer back then. And you can still be now, obviously. But back then it was very much so like, hey, you know what? I kind of want those perks. Like I kind of want to have the credit and the excitement that those goalies tend to get. So my dad figured, why not? Let's give you a try at net, and maybe you'll see that you don't like it and you'll be able to just, keep quiet after that. But ultimately, it just made me fall in love with it right from the get go. So I've been a goalie out of jealousy because I wanted to copy my brother and my dad.
I like that. That's all. My dad was a goalie playing in Ontario
Nice.
for what was it? It was St. Andrews, that school out
Nice.
there. And then I played because I played goal because I just like the pads, to be
Yeah,
honest with you. And then
it's pretty awesome.
my younger brother played, I think, just because I was playing and dad had played. So I think probably the same kind of idea, just added jealousy on that point. I like that. Um, okay, so then going from small town Dundee in New
Oh,
Brunswick to
yeah.
playing high school in, how do you pronounce this? Is it Rothesay?
Rot, Rotsey
Rothesay.
Netherwood School. Yeah.
Okay. And then playing NCAA at Cornell. Just out of all this, I mean, like you kind of touched on already. Why Cornell?
It's, you know what? I was pretty fortunate where I had a lot of options throughout the entire NCAA and throughout the conferences. And it was one of those things where it really came down to you want to go to a school where if you were to get hurt first year out of the gates, or if you get hurt third year or whatever, you want to go somewheres where you can see yourself being at that school for all 4 years regardless. So you want a good program to be enrolled in. You want the school to be something that you see being a good fit. So for me, it just made a lot of sense. Cornell is a big agricultural school. I come from a place where there's a lot of land, and you're kind of used to that kind of almost farming lifestyle. So that lined up a lot for me. But most importantly, I went for a pre-med degree. One day I want to go to med school. So to me, I really wanted something that was going to challenge me in all the best ways possible. So whenever I did hit the medical school stage, I was going to be prepared very well. And Cornell does challenge you with that. And I guess the other big part was the hockey part, which ultimately they were a massive school. They did really, really well. And Cornell is always in those top 10 rankings. So to me, to be able to go to a school that had a fair shot, but would have to be very competitive to get a national title. That's something that I really wanted. So all those factors kind of put in together just made it for me to be the perfect school. And on top of it all, the coaching staff was amazing. They gave me, no reasons not to choose them. So it was, to me, it was one of the easiest choices I ended up making. It took me a long time to make it just because it's a tough decision, right? But I definitely did the right decision.
So then, what do you attribute to your success playing at Cornell? I mean, you finished second in high school history with wins, and then third in shutouts. So what do you think made you so successful in that regard?
To be honest with you, it was one of those things where we had such a good team in a sense of we just had fun. And there's one of those things where kids always ask me all the time, "Hey, how do I get better? How do I, how do I become the best of my game?" And I always really refer to have fun, and I don't just mean it in the cliche way, like, "Oh, make sure you have fun out there and whatnot." But truly, when you're having fun is when you can really be yourself. You're really loose and you're able to perform. Without having fun, you can't really be at the best of your game. And it's really that simple. And for me at Cornell, luckily enough, we had such amazing teammates. And every time you were at the rink, you wanted to go to the rink. You wanted to be the last one to leave there. You wanted to go on the ice early and stay late just because ultimately it all made it so that you had so much fun. So, and through that, I was able to just perform at my best because I was the most comfortable and I was able to develop quickly and be able to kind of be ready for any challenge and know that I had that support with me.
I think we lose that a little bit. I mean, like you said, you want to have fun, but you don't want to mean it in like the cliche way, right?
Yeah.
It's you. We had a guest on, like I couple like last week as of recording this, where he had talked about wanting to find the best fit, for you as an athlete and for the family in general. You see and hear a lot of hockey horror stories nowadays, especially at the minor league level, of parents going at it, kids going at it, whatever. And
Yeah.
I think we kind of lose that a little bit because everybody wants to be part of the top program, part of the best program, excuse me, in the world. But you forget about sometimes as well. It's like the grass isn't always greener on the other side, right? It's just you want to make sure that that you're doing not only what's best for your development, but also in a way what's going to be best for your mental health, and just making sure that you don't fall out of love for the game at any point.
Absolutely, and you can't be chasing somebody else's dream, because I feel like sometimes you hear from other people like, oh, Wisconsin, or oh, like these schools, and you almost, I find some athletes that I work with, because I do a lot of mentorship with younger athletes, that they almost fall in love with the idea of somebody else's dream, right? Where they just hear that this top 10 school is phenomenal, or that this prep school is phenomenal, but ultimately it's, hey, but is it the right fit for you? Is it somewhere where you're going to go and you're going to be able to have fun like that, and that you're going to be able to perform, and ultimately, especially for female athletes, that you're going to be able to have good grades so that you can move on and work in the industry, just because obviously we can't play pro with $1 million contracts yet. So ultimately you have to go somewhere that's going to set you up for success, and you can't just go somewhere just because it looks good on paper, or so and so is saying that it's the best school, right?
Exactly. Um, Moving on from that, um, Cornell made it to the Frozen Four in the NCAA.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's for those who maybe don't know. I would say, is it fair to say that the Frozen Four is basically the equivalent in a sense to March Madness?
Yes. 100%.
Okay, fair
100%.
enough.
Yes.
So then, okay, so then making it to the Frozen Four, what sort of tactics did you use to kind of deal with the pressure and stress of just kind of playing in that tournament?
You know what? I remember almost not having stress, and it's going to sound so silly because everybody does have stress, but I feel like I was put in a position where throughout the entire year, we had a really good team that year. And there were so many instances where we got to prove ourselves that no matter if we had our back to the corner, we were going to be able to come out of it strong. And we had a lot of girls on the team, where we had a lot of depth, a lot of talented girls. So we knew that our first line, our third line, our fourth line were all going to be able to perform and put up numbers, or at least be able to have a really strong decor. And our penalty kill that year particularly was very strong. So I remember it was pretty funny, because I remember there were some times where we were in the dying kind of 5-on-5 situation, and we had a penalty called on us. And to me, it was almost a sigh of relief that we had a PK, just because our team had focused so heavily on the penalty kill. And I knew we had such a good penalty kill percentage that year. And I knew, okay, well, they're not going to score on the PK. So for 2 minutes, we get a little bit of a rest, which is so counterintuitive to what a PK would be. But to me, it was like, hey, we get like 2 minutes to just, breathe, catch ourselves. And then 5-on-5 is where it's at for us, just because that's where we want to be more offensive and there's more turnovers, opportunities, and whatnot. But it was a terrific year. I'm telling you, like the team was just quite special. And those are the teams that get you to the ship. If there's no other ways about it, we just ended up facing one of those big dogs in semifinals. We faced Minnesota, and to us, obviously coming from Cornell, a little Ivy League school that doesn't get to play till late October, you have one of those programs where you have a little bit less development, or maybe a little bit less of those scholarships too. So you can't bring in those top athletes that could go somewhere else for a full ride. So we faced a team that, really gave us a run for our money. And I remember it was 1-0 heading into the third. And then we had to pull the goalie at the very end of the third, and we got scored on another one. So it's a 2-1, but I always refer to that game as a 1-0 game. But ultimately it was a wild ride. It was one of those things, but it's just a testament to the team that we had back then, that we were able to go into a semifinal like it's a team like that and get it to a 1-0 game, because that's just one mistake one way or another. And yeah, absolute wild ride. But being nervous and being able to calm those nerves wasn't really an issue, because truly I find I'm someone who says when you have nerves, it's a good thing. And you have to realize that those nerves, if you've done the preparation, are those positive nerves of just your body kind of firing up and keeping you alert and ready to kind of pounce. And it's not nerves of, oh crap, I didn't do the work I had to do. And it's completely two separate nerves. And to be able to really kind of embrace that the nerves that you're feeling is just your body going into full preparation mode and not your body freaking out, then that's when I think you can really decipher that, okay, you're ready for this. So I think it's more so the nerves that I had were the ones that were like, making you really alert, where the blood is flowing through your body and you're just really ready to just explode up there.
So then how do you I guess for lack of a better term kind of prepare or train for that? Like you said, like your nerves are positive nerves, not negative nerves. So how do you, and what kind of would be your advice to younger athletes to kind of
Yeah.
uh, train
Develop
for
those
that, I guess,
tools.
or just kind of
Yeah.
manage that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And to be honest with you, I've been playing this game for over 20 years now. And every year there's different challenges. And every year brings different kind of tools that you need. And I'm the first one to say that mental performance coaches are something that every goaltender at an elite level should be seeking and having. To this day, I work with mental health performances or mental performance coach, or there's a million names for them, or sports psychs. But to this day, I work with a sports psych, and it's something that is invaluable because at the end of the day, you don't go into those sessions necessarily learning something completely new out of the blue. Because, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, but sometimes just the perspective of being able to say, hey, how come I'm feeling this way when I have this situation on the ice and I don't know how to shake it off? Like, I've tried this, and it's just like, oh, but have you tried that? It's like, oh crap, I forgot about this other tool. So it's one of those things where when you have a mental performance coach, you're really able to find a deeper level to your mental strength. And it's, again, another cliche saying, but the brain is a muscle, right? You go to the gym, you train your body and you train your muscles in that way, like the muscles you can see, but nobody, or yeah, I would say almost nobody focuses enough on the brain outside of those elite athletes, right? And the brain is a vicious thing. And oftentimes, to be honest with you, hockey can be compared to you're in the wild and there's a bear chasing you, right? Sometimes that's quite literally the feeling you can get on the ice, and you have to have the mental strength to be able to dial it back and realize, like, hey, you know what? It's not a bear chasing me on the ice. It's just a black puck that I'm trying to stop, right?
Right.
And being able to understand how your body is going to respond and be able to kind of manage those feelings, whether they're physical feelings or mental feelings, then that's when you're really, really kind of looking for that top performance. And so with a mental coach, that's really how I'm able to find those tools and be able to kind of manage those stress at the biggest stages.
I like the bear chasing one. I
Yeah.
like I like that a lot. Um, we're starting to see this more and more nowadays, particularly with cognitive training and on top of mental training as well. Because
Mhm.
again, like you said, like brain is a muscle. I mean, and for the longest time, I think a lot of people have just kind of neglected it because we know so little about our brain already. So to be able to get on top of those programs and to see them kind of in their infancy as watching them grow at the same time is a massive thing. So heard it here first here, goalies. PWHL goaltender Marlene Boissonnault says get a mental coach.
Yes, 100%.
Exactly. Okay. So kind of running it back just a little bit. You were talking about Hockey Canada and their program.
Mhm.
What was your experience like with Hockey Canada, and just kind of talking about, and just kind of talk a little bit about winning silver at the U18 Women's World Championship.
Yeah, it was playing with the national team doesn't get, much better than that, because especially back then, playing for the national team was like playing in the NHL, right? Because I think right now the NHL is very comparable to Worlds and the Olympics on the men's side. But to us back then, especially, every 4 years was very much so kind of that living the NHL lifestyle at the Olympics. So to be able to be on those U18, U22, and senior team programs was very much so an opportunity to kind of live that. And not only that, but you get to play with the best in the country, right? At all those age groups. So to me, that was a very cool opportunity to get that experience at a young age. I was called up at a very young age and been able to kind of work alongside and become really, really good friends. And to this day, some of my best friends are girls that I met across the national programs, and most of them still play to this day, and they play in the PWHL. So just to be able to be a part of that recruitment class year after year, and to be able to get the tools from the national team on how to, be challenged, but also how to kind of find your way through some of the most difficult seasons to be able to still come up on top and put up a really good performance and be called up at the end of the seasons and be, brought into the system to be able to obviously try to fight for a shot at making the team that year was pretty special. It definitely in itself was something that was very humbling in a lot of ways because they don't make it easy. They really put very high standards on you, and they make it so that you really are challenged every year, regardless whether you're a vet or somebody new coming in. You're really challenged, and the national program just has a phenomenal way of just making sure that every athlete is taken care of, and put in a place where they can become the best that they can be. And luckily enough, I was able to be one of those, and to this day I'm very, very thankful to say that I think every single year I keep getting better, and right now I'm by far the best I've ever been.
I do have to admit that watching women's hockey,
Mhm.
particularly at the national level, is a lot more exciting some days than when you watch the NHL. So, um, especially during those Olympics for sure.
Yes,
When NHL players were going to the Olympics at one point, when we had the women's Olympics happening or at the same time,
yeah,
yeah, just a lot more exciting. I found some days.
absolutely. Yes.
Um, okay, so coming out of college, what was it? This is kind of maybe a little bit of a complicated question, just because at that point in time, there were leagues like the Canadian Women's Hockey League, the National Women's
Yeah.
Hockey League. Those were kind of the
Yeah.
two competing ones.
Yep.
Eventually, the CWHL folds, and then you bring in the PWHPA, which is a mouthful in itself. So what was that kind of like trying to get pro looks on the women's side before even the PWHL existed?
Yeah, it was very challenging, and honestly, the question kind of comes at a good timing because just like I had said, how the national team kind of really takes care of their athletes in a lot of ways. There were a lot of national team players still in the system because at the end of the day, you have 20 some girls that make the team, but initially you had over 40 that were quote unquote trying out for the program, but that were brought in and taken care of. So you have over 40 athletes right there that the national team is taking care of. And within that, it was a pretty complicated and heated place to be because you had the NWHL, which had, invaluable, amazing athletes and programs and abilities to play games for an entire year. But then you also had the PWHPA, which was essentially an association putting their foot down saying, hey, if we're going to play professionally like this and be expected to perform and be expected to train 5 days a week and et cetera, we have to be able to do that as a full-time job or else we're not getting the best talent out there. So you were really kind of in a place where you were almost fighting, okay, well, what's the right thing, right? But the national team program very much so pushed towards that PWHPA to be the place to be. And they were very much so able to help the national team athletes to still be able to get funded for training and get ice coverage. So throughout the 2 3 years, we were able to get constant development on ice and off ice. There were less games, obviously, because we made it more so kind of a showcase base where we were able to go places and showcase our talent. And that only happened about maybe 6 times a year. So ultimately, for a goalie, it was a doozy because you had about 12 games a year that you were splitting amongst three goalies because you were all good. So you were all getting your game. So for about 2 3 years, maybe even four, you were getting about 4 games a year, right? So it's very limited game time. So mentally, that was a challenge in itself. But yeah, between those two programs, they both had pros and cons, right? For me, I chose the PLHPA because I knew that there was something greater at the end, and I wanted to be a part of that process. And just knowing that we were a part of the top talent pool, meaning all the national team players, because all the national team players, American and Canadian as well as European, were a part of the PLHPA. And that was kind of why I think it really started really well and was able to be launched so well. At least you knew you were training and being with some of the best. So that is another part that kind of obviously hooked me in. But yeah, there were those two programs that year and or those couple of years. It made it really difficult to go back and forth because not gonna lie, sometimes I would just scratch my head and be like, "Man, is this really worth just getting 4 games a year?" Because as a goalie, you gotta play, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it kind of bit me in the butt a little bit. Like I said in Montreal last year, I was a third there. The reason I was a third was because I didn't have as much game experience as my other two goalie partners, right? Because you're sitting in a league where you only have 6 teams and there's only 12 goalies that really see the light of day, and even less because some of the teams only played their starter and maybe the second once or twice. So being three top goalies on one team was not a good place to be. And for me, I just had the short end of the stick because I was coming from a league where I only played 4 games, right? And one of my goalie partners played in that NWHL, and the other one was the Olympic starter. So ultimately, I'm kind of fighting a rough battle. And that kind of transpired into, okay, this year. Now, I had that discussion with Montreal at the start of the year. They said, you know what? Try to go find a place in Europe to get games because you're too good to be sitting on the bench and you're too good to not be playing. So trying to fight the European rosters is a whole story in itself, but ultimately it's very, very difficult for American goaltenders actually to get into European leagues on the female side because
Oh,
there's import
interesting.
rules. Yeah, there's import rules. You can only have so many import goalies or import players, let alone goalies. And there's so many rules, and you have veterans out there that sign multi-year contracts. So ultimately, it kind of put me in a tough spot this year, where I was really lucky that Minnesota came and knocked on the door, and they said, "You know what? We really want you, boss, and ultimately, we want you to come in and kind of shake things up and be ready. If we need you, and hopefully sign you for a contract for next year." So right now, it's all about living day to day. And luckily, there's 2 more expansion teams next year. So we're going to see far more depth into our goalies because I'd be the first one to say that we have a lot of goalies in this league that don't get to see the light of day that are outstanding goalie. If you look at Boston, their third just started playing about a month ago, maybe when their starter was in an absolute wild collision in World Championships. And so their third actually had to step up, and she played games and absolutely stole the show. I think she had 2 or 3 shutouts in a row, like absolutely insane, right? So you have those talent of goalies that are just sitting on the sidelines just because there's just not enough teams. So for there to be 2 additional teams next year added to the PWHL is going to be wild. It's going to be really, really cool because you're going to get to see so much more talent from the goaltenders, but also the players, right? Because you add, call it probably 60 players, right, to the pool. So it'll be
Right.
pretty darn awesome. But yeah.
PWHL Vancouver and PWHL Seattle are our 2 expansion teams for next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess then kind of my follow-up question to all this is just like when it came to training and just kind of staying sharp, like obviously, you're not getting as much playing time maybe as your other 2 counterparts, so
Mhm.
trying to stay on top of that to the best of your ability is obviously a must.
Oh yeah, you have to, because at the end of the day, if ever you get the nod of "Hey boss, you got to strap up," then you have to be able to perform and be at that very, top part of your game. And it's kind of unfair to say, but you almost have to be in a place where you got to play as if you've been playing, right? Because if it comes down to it, you have to be able to perform and kind of carry your team forward, or at least hold the fort down. So ultimately, it's one of those things that is probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do because as a goalie, you kind of get your best development in games in a lot of ways. So ultimately, being in a practice where there's drills and then there's whistles and then there's multiple pucks within a drill, it's sometimes difficult to very much so practice that game aspect because in a game, the whistles are very far in between and there's not multiple pucks. If you make a save, the puck is still live, right? And it continues being live until it exits your zone. And even there's a turnover and you might get it right back. So there's a continuity in real games that you don't necessarily get in practices, but that's really where that mental performance I think comes in of how can you make your practices be as game like as possible with what you have. And in Montreal, we had phenomenal staff. Our goalie coaching was top notch, and all of our staff really was top notch. So I was able to get a lot of training and be able to get very long practices too. Because sometimes in a game, it could be a 2 hour long game, and if you go in double OT, whatever, you have that game fitness that you need to be able to tap in and practice as well. So I was able to do that through a lot of practices, and the staff was phenomenal. So I was lucky in a place where I was very confident that had I gotten that nod, I would have absolutely killed it. But ultimately, it just came down to it wasn't really a need, and there was just not enough games to really kind of wear out 2 goalies like that. And it just kind of put me in a spot where I just had to kind of keep my eyes in the, onto the next prize. And whenever that would come, I don't know, but it definitely puts me in a place where I need to stay fit for it and ready for it. Yeah.
So then moving from the PWHPA to
Yep.
the PWHL, what
Yeah.
were kind of the main differences that the PWHL had to offer, and how do you think it has changed the approach for women to play pro?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things where the PWHL finally had a full season, right? The PWHP obviously, like I said, had showcases, so it's almost like little tournaments we had throughout the year with practices in between. But the PWHL finally had that professional treatment, right? It's little things as simple as we had a dressing room where we could keep our gear overnight or throughout the year, right? Unless we're on the road. In the PWHPA, it was you're logging, like you're bringing your bag from your house basement or your living room if you have a little shoebox of an apartment to the rink back and forth nonstop, right? And ultimately that was kind of the lifestyle for a couple of years. And the PWHL definitely didn't start little. It definitely started with very much so that, similar NHL treatment where you get there, you're treated like a pro, you're expected to perform like a pro, but you're given all the tools to be a pro, right? There's no more issues about, hey, my blocker, I'm starting to feel pucks through my blocker, but I just got to suck it up, or I just got to add a couple baseball those little baseball gloves or little baseball mittens under. Now it's okay. Your blocker's an issue. Here's another one, right? So you have that gear. You have no more excuses as to any reasons not to perform. Now you finally have a stage where you're able to be the best that you can be, and you have all the tools for that. It's incredible. We get incredible sponsorships. Obviously, we get incredible viewing through. We're able to touch finally every age group, and we're able to bring dreams like no other that's ever been had before. Right now, you have girls that know what the PWHL is versus in the past, even though we had the CWHL and NWHL, there were so many and it was so confusing for the young girls to know who to cheer for that it was just a default, okay, we're cheering for Team Canada, right, every 4 years, because the rest was so confusing and, to be honest with you, very watered down just because we didn't have one concrete league. So if you have multiple, you're kind of watering down the product a little bit. So finally the PWHL, in my opinion, is just, they've done it right. We're finally where we need to be, and we're able to finally approach the game for what it is, and that is a very professional competitive sport, and we're able to kind of put up the numbers to show that.
I think the way that they market it too is a lot better than what we've seen, because I personally was following the NWHL for the longest time.
Yep.
um and you didn't really hear or know much about it. With the PWHL, it's been a lot better for
Yes.
sure. The way that they market it, the broadcast, and then even just kind of the athletes such as yourself, and that's kind of how you and I connected over social media and all
Yep.
that, and just kind of the athlete interaction there.
Yeah.
Definitely great hockey there to watch as well. So now with the PWHL now in existence, how does that change the approach for prospects wanting to play pro?
It's definitely challenging because, like I said, there's not many teams, so there's not many wiggle room, or there's not much wiggle room. So ultimately, you're sitting in a place where you're wanting to wait and kind of maybe time your exit from university pretty well. I know there's a couple athletes right now that are actually considering kind of taking that extra fifth COVID year in university or taking an extra post grad year in university, just because next year is the Olympic year, and the following year there's going to be a lot of retirements, right? So even though next year there's two new teams and so 60 new players, a lot of those will be pulled from Europe or will be pulled from university, but only the top ones. So if ever you're kind of a bubble pro athlete, waiting out another year might be a good idea because you're waiting for those doors to open. So ultimately, as somebody who wants to play pro, it is very difficult, but in the best way possible, because ultimately it forces you to be at the very top of your game. And I think that's why from the grassroots level all the way to the very top of the NCAA's and European pro, you're going to be in a place where you're finally going to see that level completely elevate, right? And the way I compare it is, think about the NHL 30 years ago versus now. If a team from 30 years ago was to play a team now, they'd get absolutely destroyed, right? Just because the
Mhm.
game just continues to evolve nonstop. And right now we're sitting in that place where we're the very first year of this happening, right? Or the second year now. But we're in a place where 10 years from now it's going to be unrecognizable, right? And so it's a very cool place to be. And the girls kind of growing up and getting to see this happening now is it's a pretty nice place to be because they get to develop immensely throughout their childhood to high school to university years and hit the pro stage with immense skills. So there's room for them. It's just the door is very, very, very narrow. But it's just like the NHL. You're in a place where you got to be the best of the best to play, right? Yeah,
I like it. It definitely makes it more competitive for sure. And I wonder if at some point then we start to see, um, similar to out here in the western side of things, where we have the Western Hockey League and the Ontario Hockey League and the Quebec Major Juniors. So I
yeah.
wonder. I mean, like obviously, college right now is kind of serving in that kind of role, if you
Yeah.
will. But I wonder if, I don't know, let's say 5 years later down the line, we maybe start to see that, just kind of
I
those
wouldn't.
women's junior leagues happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, ultimately, I do think we're going to need those farm teams just because that's where you're really going to be able to develop those athletes to mature a little bit. Because whether or not you have some athletes graduating our university and they're, you know, 20, 21, right? So you're sitting in a place where now you hit a league where there's 34-year-olds, right? Or 30-year-olds. And you're not only obviously skilled, but you're young. So ultimately getting a little bit more of that maturity of, okay, now it's not, partying every Friday night, Saturday night. Now it's very much so like we're playing every Friday night, Saturday night, and you got to be able to show up and do it the same thing on a Tuesday and then do it on a Friday and then do it on a Monday. And you got to be able to kind of keep that schedule going. So I think having a farm league to very much so, funnel a certain kind of, understanding of how the professional world works is going to be non-negotiable. I think it's going to happen one day, but it's just a question of having the proper structure, having the proper funding, and having the proper investors too, right? Because those leagues, they can't be a repeat of the NWHL, CWHL, or PWHPA. They have to be very much so just like the PWHL, right?
Right. So I guess not talking so much about the league anymore, moving back over to you personally, just where do you see the future of the women's game going? Because obviously right now we have PWHL Vancouver and PWHL Seattle next year. I'm hoping here in Edmonton that we get a team
Yeah.
rather in the near future rather than later down the road. Um, where just I guess where would you, or what is kind of the chatter that you hear? Where would you like to see the game go in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're sitting in a place where we're going to see more expansions continue to grow. Do I think they're going to expand right away next year? No, I think they're going to keep the two probably and keep it to the eight for a little bit. Do I think Edmonton is probably in the next running? I would think so. Honestly, if I were to guess, I think Edmonton would be the next kind of expansion, just because there's an incredible fan base there, and I think it was proven just with the neutral site game that we had there. Um, and I'm from Calgary myself, so I'm also very biased. So I'd love an Alberta team to be in the runnings, and ideally, obviously, Alberta and Calgary kind of mix there. I think that'd make an incredible Alberta battle in itself. But I do think that ultimately they're going to have to keep expanding out west or at least Midwest, because obviously right now the initial six or five of the six were very, very east, outside of Minnesota. And so Minnesota had obviously the very unfortunate kind of travel situation where they had to fly everywhere versus every other team were able to drive everywhere except Minnesota, essentially. So I think right now having Seattle and Vancouver in the mix is going to be very interesting, because I wonder, is it going to be very much so charter flights now to get places? Because for a quick turnaround, situation of games, you're going to have to obviously not take commercial flights because you can't really gamble on the delays or whatnot. So it'll be all interesting how they do that. But I do think in terms of the future of the PWHL, we're going to be seeing something absolutely incredible in terms of expansions still happening. And who knows how many teams that should kind of max out to, because ultimately you don't want to water down the product either. But do I see there being 10 teams within 5 years? Yeah. I think 5 years from now, we'll be sitting with 10 teams, and hopefully they're Midwest for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a women's Battle of Alberta would be
Yeah.
very exciting. I had the chance to go to the showcase game with Ottawa and Toronto
Yeah.
at Rogers Place back in February. I was there with my brother-in-law, and that was it was a lot of fun, really exciting. and just the vibe and just kind of the atmosphere in that in Rogers Arena, typically where the Edmonton Oilers play, was effectively the same,
Yeah.
right? And so that was really cool to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because a lot of people that haven't watched women's hockey at the PWHL level always will go to the games and say, "Holy crap, this was actually nuts!" Like I'm gonna be watching from now on because unless you've really seen professional women's hockey, I don't think you realize how competitive and how fun it is. Because you look at the NHL, and obviously, like I'm one stuck to my TV every night looking at the playoff series, right? Like it's very exciting, and you're very much so into it. But and obviously, I'm very biased because I'm a part of the PWHL, but it's very much so the same thing on the women's side, and I hear that mostly from fans, right? Where they sit there and it's like their team's neck is on the line, and to them, it's very exciting, and the atmosphere that they have within the rinks is absolutely incredible. They're able to give the fans an experience like no other, and they have the funds, they have the money to really make sure that they have, whether it's that, I don't know how you refer to that person, but that one person that does the entertainment between whistles and between periods, that has the mic in the rinks, whoever that person's title, whatever that person's title is, they have those, right? So they have high entertainment, they have DJs at games, they're able to make it just so fun.
The in-game host is the word that you're looking for.
There you go.
Um,
There you go.
okay, so I have other questions here, but I do have some more, just kind of my own here. Just kind of again backtracking again here, because we've talked a lot about the league. We talked a lot about your playing career, but I want to talk a little bit just about your development for a second here.
Yeah.
So, I guess for you, just have like obviously you're working with a goalie coach now in PWHL Frost.
Yeah.
Just how much coaching did you have playing?
Growing up versus university versus pro, all very, very different. So growing up, never had a goalie coach. My dad was my goalie coach. My dad played, and my dad is a very smart man. He's an engineer, so he was all over, books and reading all about the techniques that were out back then, because obviously the internet wasn't what it is now, where you can go on YouTube and see all the techniques. So he was very good, and he was coaching me throughout my childhood. But until I hit um, university, there wasn't much. I remember at prep school, there was one goalie coach that would come out maybe once a week, once every other week, something like that. That was very helpful because to me that was new. But until university, there wasn't really that consistent coaching. And I remember hitting Hockey Canada one of the first years and finally getting goalie coaching. And to me, it was almost kind of, foreign, where finally I was getting kind of, keys to the castle on how to do things and getting kind of actual feedback that was, able to get me to the next level. My dad did a phenomenal job in teaching me the fundamentals, obviously, to bring me to the provincial and national stage. And then once I hit Cornell, there was a goalie coach there who was phenomenal, who was also our assistant coach. So she was able to obviously really, really elevate my game and being able to kind of show me video analysis and all this stuff so that I was able to kind of find a new level to my game. And obviously, the PWHPA was very much so a set of years where I had to find kind of my own goalie coaching on the side. And I was very fortunate where there's a local goalie coach in Calgary who happens to be the national team goalie coach, and he actually goalie coaches the Scepters for Toronto. So I was very much so with a really good goalie coach and able to kind of elevate my game that way too within those years. And obviously in the PWHL, they do an incredible job. In Montreal, we had two goalie coaches actually alternating so that every practice we had a goalie coach, right? So should not one not be able to make it, the other one was able to, and if both were able to make it, they were both there. And then here in Minnesota, we have another phenomenal goalie coach who's able to be at our practices and travel on the road with us. So it definitely keeps elevating over the years, and so the development has been nonstop elevating. Right, when you're a kid, I find that you don't necessarily need that goal coaching as frequent because you also got to be able to figure it out on your own, right? You got to be able to fly on your own and figure out how to do a butterfly slider, figure out how to do sea cuts and things like that, because you can be told so many times, but until you really figure out, until you really develop that strength, a goalie coach can only do so much, right? So it's definitely at those higher level, higher elite levels, whether it's triple A's, whether it's higher prep schools or universities or pro levels, that you obviously need to fine tune your game and find ways to obviously keep developing. But yeah, that's pretty much my path with development over the years.
So I have a follow up question to that, but I can ask that a little bit later here. There's a photo. I think it's with you, Marc Andre Fleury, and a
Yeah,
couple of other guys out there.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, being in Minnesota, you're very much next to the Minnesota Wild
yeah,
in an extent here. So,
yeah.
what was it like to be on the ice with possibly one of the greatest goaltenders in modern history? To be out there with him, to train with him, I guess to an extent. Just kind of what was that like?
It was very cool. I mean, to be honest with you, he obviously his season just finished a week ago, and this is very recent. So that photo is actually pretty recent from last week. We were on the ice training, so obviously we're here training full time. And then out of nowhere, for one of the practice, him and Spurgeon stepped onto the ice and just kind of came on, and we were just doing kind of little goalie session or skill sessions out of one end, so the other end was open. So probably our staff kind of offer them obviously the other half because he has to prep and Spurgeon as well has to prep for Worlds. So they flew out a couple nights ago, but ultimately they had to train for that, and we have to keep training for playoffs. So it was very much one of those things of, hey, we both have the ice, so might as well share it. And then it was pretty funny because ultimately we have the same, so we have a practice rink and then we have our game rink, and it's the same for the Wild. So the same practice rink as ours and the same game rink as ours. So we share the same facilities, but ultimately very, very neat. And he came onto the ice, and obviously that first kind of like the guy's been playing in the NHL for what 20 years, and I'm 27, so I've been
Close to that,
seeing
yeah.
him. Yeah, I've been watching him since I literally strapped on the pads, right? So he's been an idol of mine forever. So when he stepped on the ice, it's very much so one of those things where I've never been one to really kind of be starstruck, but for some reason when I was seeing him, it's very much so like all you keep playing in your mind is like all the videos you've seen online and all of the times you've seen him play, and it's like him being right there and asking these questions and chit chatting like you're both pros. It's very much so like a whirlwind of a feeling, but super awesome guy. I mean, the guy's awesome. He's nonstop laughing on the ice. He's having a blast. He's not your typical, cookie cutter goalie. He makes saves in ways that you wouldn't believe, and he's phenomenal at all of it. I definitely think he's one of the very best goalies that we've seen to this day, and no, it's incredible. Him and Spurgeon, they're both very, very talented, obviously players, but I think very, very amazing people as well. And we got on the ice a couple times with them, and no, they were awesome. And at the end of our training together, when they left to go to Worlds, we gave them a couple shirts and hoodies and toques and things like that for their girls because
Oh
them and
yeah.
the staff members that came on, they all have young girls, right? That all are very big fans of the Frost. So we kind of exchanged a couple merch here and there and a couple autographs here and there to kind of distribute around and have. And it's very cool. It's very a lot of respect, a lot of mutual respect. Obviously, we both are at the very top of our games, and it's one of those things where it's very cool. Definitely a unique experience. If you had told, 10-year-old me that one day I'd be practicing with Flurry, probably would have laughed in your face.
You were living out a lot of young kids' dreams that day.
Yeah.
Um, Again, another follow up here, and I'm sorry that I'm going off topic. What's the so how often, I guess, and I don't know if you can speak for any of the other teams, but when you're in a market like Minnesota, Toronto, Montreal, just to name the top three here that I can think of,
Yeah.
how often, I guess, or do you ever really get a chance to communicate with kind of your counterparts on the men's side? You know, I mean, like obviously there's a photo there with Marc Andre Fleury,
Mhm.
but with Montreal, did you get a chance to talk to guys like Sam Montembeau, or I don't know, obviously Carey Price would have been gone and around that point, or even Toronto, you got guys like Stolarz and Wool. So is there any kind of inter athlete, inter market communication there? And just kind of
There
what it is do you guys talk about?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is. But the thing is that once the season starts, especially ours didn't start till December this year, and the year before was January. So their season is already full on, right? And their schedule is much crazier than ours. They have almost triple the games we have, if not quadruple the games we have. So they're constantly on the road. And when they're home, they're with their family. So there's not much cross paths that way. Because even here with our practices throughout the year that we've had, they're on the ice a couple hours before us, or an hour before us, or an hour after. So there's cross paths that way, but we all have very strict schedule where we have our training, we have our media, we have our whatever, right? So and the schedules are designed where we're not really in each other's ways, if that makes sense, so that things can flow really well. But ultimately there's a lot of media opportunities and a lot of days where we can promote the game. Like I know in Montreal, we there's some days where they have almost like a skills session or like a skills showcase where some of the Montreal girls were able to go with some of the Canadian guys and be able to kind of go showcase the game. And you have a little bit of kind of media and promotion opportunities that way. In Minnesota is the same thing, right? They have some of our girls, Taylor Heisey, for example, going to the Minnesota Wild games and, doing that "Let's Go Wild" chant at the beginning of the game. And so there's a lot of crossovers that way. And outside of that, in terms of just personally between the players, I think there's a lot of mutual respect. There's a lot of age differences between a lot of the athletes as well. Like I said, Fleury is 40, and we have some girls that are coming out and they're 21, right? So there's a huge gap that way. So you don't have as many connections, but no, there's a massive mutual respect when you cross one another in the hallway. It's very much so like, hey, how's it going? Things like that, and that kind of common chit chat or small talk. But ultimately, I think the most invaluable thing is the major respect, right? We respect their game for what it is, which is a very high end, top pro program, and they very much so, you know, do that with us too. And they respect that it's very much so a top program and it's very much so professional. So they leave us in our lane, we leave them in their lane, just so that we can both perform at, the very best and hopefully bring a cup to Minnesota.
We talked a lot already throughout this episode, just kind of talking about the struggles that you faced as a female playing hockey.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for younger female athletes kind of dealing with similar situations?
Yeah, it's a tough one because at the end of the day, there's a couple things that you can't teach someone. So I try to be very careful whenever I say this, but ultimately, you have to be someone that has incredible resiliency and you have to be your own biggest fan no matter what. So whether you're the worst kid on the ice, because I've been there, I've been the goalie who got lit up 8-0, and my goalie partner would go in and we'd win 8-0. You still have to be your biggest fan, right? And you have to be that one person that shows up for yourself day in, day out, whether someone's looking or not. And you're not going to get the credit and you're not going to get you know, the fame, if you will, until very much so the very end of that hard work. And maybe even saying the end is not the right word, because I do think once you hit the professional stage, the work almost just starts. Um, but ultimately, you really have to be your biggest fan. You have to be the one who believes in you more than anybody else, because your parents won't believe in you as much as you do. Your friends won't. Your goalie coaches won't. Your team coaches won't. As much as you'd want to believe so, they don't, because at the end of the day, you're the person looking out for yourself more than anybody else, right? Because you're the person that knows yourself the better, and you want to be able to be the one that achieves your dreams, because your dreams are only yours. So it's one of those things where my biggest advice is have fun, for lack of better terms, but also be your biggest fan, right? And have self-belief like you wouldn't imagine.
I like the be your biggest fan one. I think just I really like that one a lot. Marlene, what are your plans for life after hockey? I mean, you went to Cornell. You have a med degree.
Mhm.
Um, anything planned with that? Any plans with that? Goalie coaching, is that a thing in your patch? Just kind of what's the plan for you?
So I actually do a lot of goalie coaching already during the PWHPA. We weren't getting crazy salaries, and we never did with professional leagues until the PWHL. But I was doing a lot of goalie coaching, so I actually do a lot of goalie coaching in Calgary. and I actually got asked to do a lot of goalie coaching internationally as well. So I get flown out to a couple places to do goalie coaching already. So that's definitely going to be something I keep doing because honestly, I love it. Goalie coaching is something absolutely incredible to me because you get to give back, but you get to be a little tiny small part in somebody's journey, and that to me is absolutely exhilarating. So definitely goalie coaching. After that, it's tough to say. I'd love to go to med school. I think med school would be one of those things, or it's a non-negotiable for me. When is that going to happen? I don't know, because it's one of those things where you can always go back to school, but you can never go back to playing pro hockey, right? So to me, I'm just going to stick it out for as long as I can to play pro hockey, see how far the body really kind of takes me. Hopefully, dodging every injury that comes my way, and then once I really kind of choose to hang up the skates, then at that point we'll see. It's definitely going to be a tough transition because obviously hockey is your identity, but I very much so have put myself in a place where I've never left anything in the tank. So I'm in a place where wherever hockey takes me, I'm very happy with the career I've had. Um, but that being said, I better have another 5 years in me.
We're gonna have to get you up in Edmonton.
Yeah.
If you're
Heck yeah.
if you're doing goalie coaching in Calgary, we have True North goaltending for shameless plug. We have 2 camps coming up.
Nice.
One in late July, which I won't be able to attend because I'll be expecting to birth my first child, and
Nice.
then another one in about mid August. I think August, like the week of August 11th.
Nice.
So we're gonna have to stay in touch here, and
Yeah.
we're gonna have to we're gonna have to find a way to bring you up for
Yeah,
a
heck yeah.
for a True North goaltending thing. So
Heck
Nathan,
yeah.
I know you're watching this on playback because Nathan does all the editing and stuff before this goes out.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to make it happen. So
Yeah, let's do it.
we'll definitely stay in touch there for sure.
Yeah, I'm down. So down. It's super close, and like I said, I do endless goalie camp. So no, I'm in.
Excellent. Marlene, just we kind of already touched on this already, but just kind of as one generalization, what's one piece of advice that you would have for goalies?
Oof. One piece of advice I would have for goalies. Um, to be honest, don't my biggest advice would be don't be that cookie cutter goalie. Be yourself because if anything, if I take my own experience, if I take, Marc-Andre Fleury, who I was on the ice with recently, if I take a lot of goalies in the pro level, you're not meant to be a cookie cutter. I know that there's a lot of things out there that say your glove is supposed to be held this way, your blocker is supposed to be held this way, but at the end of the day, if you stop the puck, nobody cares how you stop it, right? They don't ask how, they ask how many, right? That's a classic kind of saying for players, but for goalies as well. If you make the save, who cares how you stop it? Do it in a way that's efficient. Obviously, do it in a way where you can get rebounds, but don't worry so much about being a perfect goalie because being a perfect goalie does not exist. It's something that every goalie coaches seems to strive for, but it's not really the purpose. And a lot of goalie coaches just try to give you that kind of guidebook, but they don't very much so mean for you to be exactly perfect in everything you do. It's just more so tools in a toolbox and for you to use them appropriately when they need to be used. But ultimately, be yourself. Just be athletic, be crazy, and have fun.
Where can people find you here just to wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all over social media. I like Instagram. I haven't posted much this year as much as I used to, but I go on Instagram as Marlene Boss. Boss is my nickname in the hockey world, so it's very much so my first name and then Boss. That is on there, and then I think I have that on handle on most social media. So that's definitely where you can find me. I love to put out some goalie content, some female athlete content, and just all sorts of crazy content. If you go on there, I very much so take it easy, and I post anything and everything on there. So I have fun with it.
We'll link up your social media down in the show notes as well as the website to Minnesota Frost. There, Marlene, I have been excited for this interview for a long time, especially when you and I connected back in March. Thank you very much for coming on today, for taking the time out of your day for us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, goalies, that'll do it for another episode of the DIY Goalie Podcast presented by True North Goaltending. You can follow us on your favorite social media platforms at True North Goaltending, except on Instagram because we like to be different. You can follow us there at YEG Goalie Coach. You can follow myself over on Instagram on Monday GC. You can also head over to our website, which is www.truenorthgoaltending.com. We are still in the middle of process of transferring everything over from the DIY goalie website over to True North Goaltending's website. All our drills, our blogs, our whatever else that we have on there. So we are still in the process of that. So make sure you guys keep checking back to truenorthgoaltending.com for all of that fun stuff. If you are watching over on the YouTube side of things, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. If you are listening on your favorite social media, or not social media, your favorite podcast platforms, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, etc., make sure you guys hit that follow button and you share the platform. The more goalies that we can bring together, the better. On behalf of Nathan and myself and Marlene, thank you very much for listening. Make some saves. Take care.